Bueno, pues muchas gracias a todos los que estáis aquí.
Thank you very much for staying here in the room for this presentation. I'd like to thank the organization of Rooted. For us, it's a pleasure to be here and to see how the community is growing, and that we went from being just a handful of people to be such a huge crowd. We will use a storytelling format to describe a very high impact event, a complex story. So we will distribute the roles among us. I'm the blue guy. As you can see my t-shirt. With this color, I'll be in charge of the defense and detection and reaction at the event, against the event, and each one has his part. Good morning, as Roman was saying, it's the first time I'm here, but not here, but also there. And on the floor, I'm orange, and I will be in charge of managing expectations. And so, as my color says, I'm in charge of carrying out the attack with a strategy to counteract the defense strategy.
Empezamos con el vídeo, ¿no?
Sí, dale, dale.
Venga, vamos a poner un vídeo.
Try to show you a video to give you an idea of the situation that gave rise to the call we received from this company. Okay, no audio, just plug in the jack.
Está puesto.
Okay, this was a perfect demo. We tried it and tested it 30 minutes ago. So this is the screen that reads any day, anytime, any place.
Hola, ¿me escuchas bien?
Hello, can you hear me? Yes. Can you hear me? A bit strange with the distortion, but enough to understand. Is this a safe line? Hardly any communications are sure, so I take some precautions to avoid being tracked. I saw you read my mail. Your mask looks good. Did you follow my instructions? Yeah. Strictly. But I'm a bit worried. I'm a bit afraid to get into problems. Don't worry, if you follow our indications, you won't get any problem, and you will get what you want. Did you get access to the servers? I'm trying. I almost had it, but it's difficult to do it without them noticing, and this slows me down. Everything is planned and we can't delay the date. We have an order and we never fail. Our plan has to be fulfilled to the smallest details, or we won't have enough impact. Okay, this week I will focus on this. Download the rootkit I sent you and run it on the servers. Are you sure this will work? I don't want to end up in the street or even worse. We've been years carrying out these operations throughout the world. We go in all together and we leave all together. We never fail and we never betray our clients. Install the rootkit and we do the rest. Behave naturally. Ignore any news you may hear and everything will be fine. It's the only way to reach our objective. Many things depend on this, even people could die. But you shouldn't worry about this. You do your part and this will be finished in just a few days. And if I need something else, don't try to get in touch with me unless strictly necessary. When this is over, we will never talk again. Okay, as you have seen, we have characterized the situation.
Esto es una caracterización, vamos a entender que una empresa de esa, una
we
agencia
have
de
to
estas de
understand that
3D
an
captura
agency of
algo de
this type
información,
captures
no saca
some
nada más,
information,
y un cliente nos llama
and we
en
got a
momento de
call
crisis
from a
porque está viendo
client
que se
in a
está
crisis
materializando o
because
está
he
en curso
realizes
un
that
intento de,
an
de alto
attempted
impacto sobre su
high
organización.
impact attack
Vamos a
against
poner
his
en contexto
organization is
el
beginning.
entorno primero, porque
We'll
obviamente
set up the context
dependiendo de la
because
organización
depending
y su
on the
fingerprint
organization
cambia
and the
muchísimo cómo vamos
fingerprint
a tener que
changes
tratar
a
de
lot.
defenderla, ¿vale? Primero todo, vamos a ver
First, we
el país.
have to
El
see the
país en el que
country.
estamos ubicados
The
es
country
Absetia,
is
es un país
Absetia,
en el Cáucaso,
in the
es un
Caucasian
país con una cierta
region.
inestabilidad
It's
política.
a rather politically unstable
Como
country.
sabéis, Absetia
Absetia
es independiente desde
is an independent
1992
since
y,
1992 from the Soviet
un
Union.
entorno democrático,
It is a
pero
democratic
evidentemente
republic,
con alta
but obviously
influencia
with a high
del,
influence
digamos, de
of
Occidente
the
yéndose
West.
hacia ese ámbito, ¿no? Con lo cual, bueno, pues ahí hay varios bloques y
So
hay
there
una
are
cierta
several
inestabilidad geopolítica.
regions there.
Por lo mismo, es, como veis arriba, es el paso del
It
gasoducto
is
principal de
also
toda la
the
extracción
passage of the
de
main gas
del Mar Caspio, y
pipeline
además
from the
tiene
Caspian Sea
bastantes reservas
and
en
has a
el
lot
Mar Negro donde tiene
of
costa, ¿vale? Con lo cual, evidentemente,
reserves,
depende
all
muchísimo
reserves
de
in
todo
the
lo que
Black
es la
Sea
gestión
along its
del gas, que
coastline.
es uno de
So,
sus mayores,
one of
digamos,
its main
contribuidores en su Producto Interior Bruto. Nuestro
products
cliente,
is
pues es
natural gas.
Absetia, es una empresa
Our
pública
company, our
privatizada,
client
de la
is
cual todavía
Gasitia,
forma
a
parte
privatized,
el Estado,
previously public
y
company.
su core business,
And its
digamos, su
core
actividad
business
principal evidentemente está en la extracción
is
y
in
en
the
el
extraction
transporte de
and
gas
transport
de los
of natural
gasoductos.
gas through the gas
En cualquier caso,
pipelines.
se ha diversificado,
it
tiene
has
también
diversified
renovables en
itself, it
distintos
has renewables
países,
in different
sobre todo
countries,
por el ámbito de
mainly
África para
in
fotovoltaicas,
Africa
por el
for
ámbito de biogás para
sun
Asia,
energy,
y luego tiene
biogas for
también
Asia,
infraestructuras de
and
servicios,
also
sobre
services
todo el puerto es
infrastructures.
crítico porque
The
tiene
port is
también todo el
critical
transporte de gas, porque además tienen transporte de personas, aeropuertos, etc.
and
Como veis,
they have an
tienen
airport as
concesiones
well.
hasta
So
el
they have
2020 y
concessions
por
up
lo
to
tanto se enfrentan ahora,
2020,
son concesiones
and
largas
right
y se
now
enfrentan
they
a
are
una
facing
renovación que
a
es crítica para la
renewal
empresa porque
process
podría
which
generar
is
un impacto muy
critical
alto.
for the company.
¿Vale? Este es el entorno, el contexto en el que vamos a empezar.
So this
Y
is
por
the
lo tanto,
context.
en el momento en el que nos
So
llama
when
el
we
cliente, pues obviamente
enter
el cliente está en
stage
modo pánico,
is
porque
when
sabe que se enfrenta
we
a
get a
una
call
situación
from
de
the
alto
client in
impacto,
panic mode.
sabe que le
He's
puede
facing a
afectar
situation of
y
high
obviamente
impact
lo primero que nos pide
that
es
can
que
cause a
pongamos
lot
en
of
contexto
damage
esta
and
amenaza y que
allows us,
entendamos dónde
is
tenemos
asking
que
us
estar,
to
¿vale?
place this threat in
Aquí,
context.
fundamentalmente lo primero que
So
hacemos,
the first thing we
sin duda,
do
cuando están hablando de alto impacto, es entender qué
is
puede
to
ser un
understand
alto impacto
what
para una
does a high
organización,
impact
porque a lo mejor no
mean
estamos hablando de
for
una
this
fuga de datos
organization,
privados,
because
no
maybe
estamos
it's not
hablando,
a
sino que
leak
realmente
of private
estamos viendo
data
que hoy
or
en día
theft,
existen multitud
but
de
there are
activos
multitude
críticos de
of
una organización,
critical
de procesos
assets
críticos
and critical
que, dado ese
processes
proceso de transformación
that,
digital,
due to the
están
digital
soportados
transformation
por activos
processes,
tecnológicos
are
que,
supported by
evidentemente,
technological
cualquier
assets,
disrupción
and
sobre esto
any
genera un
disruption
impacto
would generate
elevadísimo
a very
en la
high
organización, pero no solo
impact
en
in the
términos
organization,
económicos,
not
sino
only in
también
economic
incluso,
terms,
como hemos
but
visto que
also
decía el vídeo, vidas humanas, de
in
reputacionales,
human lives,
legales,
reputational
y
damage,
sobre todo,
legal
como vemos,
problems,
frente a las
and
futuras licitaciones.
and
Por otro lado,
also,
sabemos que hay un adversario, de momento
with
tenemos
a view to
claro
renewal
un
of the
poco
licenses.
cómo se está pintando esto, aunque no sabemos
So we
quién es
want
quién
to
todavía, y sabemos que es
see
el que
what this
tiene
looks
una
like
motivación que es
and
generar
who
ese
could
alto
have a
impacto sobre la
motivation to
organización.
generate this
Vale,
high
este es el punto
impact on the
de partida y sobre él
organization.
vamos a
So this
intentar
is the
identificar cuáles son los
baseline,
puntos
and we'll
críticos
try
en
to
este
identify the
caso, para
critical
después
points.
lanzar todas las capacidades. A partir de ahí, vamos a intentar definir un poco el
So
mapa
here
de
we'll
lo que
try to
sería
define the
la
map
comunidad atacante
of
para
the
entender
attackers
dónde estamos.
unit.
Lo primero, el adversario es desconocido, pero
The
vamos a asumir que
adversary
es un
is
competidor. El
unknown,
único que
but
puede
let
tener
us
un interés
assume
grande
he's a
en una
competitor.
disrupción,
The only
más allá de un
one
estado
who
que a lo
could
mejor
have
sería un ataque un
an
poco más
interest
de
in
estado a estado, sería un
disrupting
competidor
this
que se
company's
enfrenta a esta
business
licitación. También
is
entendemos
a
que el
rival
motivo
for the renewal of the
es la propia
licenses.
licitación, porque salen varias
Then there are
y
several
estamos jugando nuestro
licenses
dinero, como hemos
at
visto, en la
stake
facturación de la
involving
empresa.
huge amounts
El
of
vector,
money.
la disrupción,
The
está
vector
claro, el
is
impacto.
disruption,
Si estamos
high
basándonos en
impact.
esto, y por lo tanto sabemos que
So we
probablemente su foco va
know
a estar en
that
gas, ¿vale?
it will be
Los
focused on
actores,
the gas
tenemos claro que
assets.
hay un crimen organizado externo de otro país.
It is
que,
clear there's an organized group,
internamente
organized
tiene un
crime group
insider.
from another
Dado
company
que
and
tienen
that
un
they
insider,
have
es
from another
importantísimo
country
entender que
and
tenemos
that
que
they
actuar
have
con
an
muchísimo
insider.
sigilo. Ya
So we
sea
have
así
to
cuando llegamos,
act
porque
with a lot
ya
of
solo hay
stealth
ciertas
because
personas de
there are
altísima confianza en la
some
organización
people
que saben lo que está
who
pasando,
know what
¿vale?
is happening.
Pero todas las acciones
Just
las
a
tendremos que
small group knows what is happening. So we have to be very stealthy as far as we can. The targets are unknown. The primary has to be the gas assets, and the secondary should be transport. And then the sophistication of the attacker is high. So one of our approach is to break that supply chain and attack the main asset that will give entry to the secondary one, which is the organized crime.
Me he ido atrás, perdón. Bueno, vamos a determinar, todavía no.
We will determine the risk to understand where we have to focus our work, in the understanding that the frequency we're facing here is quite safe. We have 100% certainty that the attack will take place, so the probability of action, we know it is intentional, and that we can work here with some counterintelligence. In vulnerabilities, we can do a lot against the attacker. We can influence on the dedication. They have the material they use. In the background, there's a lot of money at stake, so there could be several pathways for the attack. We also have to work on the difficulty of protection. As you can see, we are beginning to identify the areas we want to close down or protect. In the area of magnitude, the protection controls are on one side, and the idea is to minimize the impact and the dimension. Although there is always some impact, so we can work on impact reduction related to the resistance of the organization against the event. Back again, I'm sorry. As regards vulnerability, our objective is high capacity and difficulty. That means we don't have a lot of defense weapons because they have an insider as well. So the idea is to reduce as much as possible the substantiation of the attack. For this, we will review the main capacities, which is work on the modus operandi, work on deception, that they not achieve their objectives, anticipate intelligence. This will be done by the red part, who works on anticipation. As regards difficulty, more of the same. We will protect the supply chain, see if we can, and we will work on lateral movement, access control, and protection of assets, which is the blue part. Let's see if I can take it forward this time. Okay, in what concerns magnitude, we know that there are even lives at stake. The impact can be very big if we focus on the gas pipeline and extraction. On the one hand, we want to limit the intention and the frequency. Let's see if we can dissuade them, and what actions we can carry out together with the law enforcement, etc., to get them to desist from the attack, as well as on limiting the magnitude to establish strategies on the basis of how the attack develops. Management crisis, backup, degrading, blackout, establish all the mechanisms to be activated at a moment's notice. So this approach is very direct and aims at defining the capabilities that will be deployed when the landing takes place. The first thing is to orchestrate everything, to coordinate, then deploy capacities. This will be focused on concealing. We have to be very careful because there are many interests at stake. On this basis, we define a point in time in which we take control and establish all the mechanisms to recover control of the facilities with a minimum impact. We also have different type of impacts, reputational, legal, economic. We are coordinating this defense and protection in line with the top management, with the legal offices, with investigators, with insurance companies. So there will be a number of committees and decision-making bodies, and here the orange has to be highly aligned to convey or to report the news in the most diligent manner. So how will we coordinate or orchestrate all this? Basically, we will do a deployment in three main areas. The first part is to evaluate the consequences and focus on the areas in which we know we could be successful, that is, diminishing the impact, dissuade the attackers, and protect. Thereafter, we establish mechanisms of relationship with the field teams that will be doing the investigation as well as the defense. So we will review the entire parameter of all the businesses of this company to identify any entrance vector, and then we will classify the most critical in-house platforms to verify their level of security. And we will implement intelligence capacities. We will monitor different sources to find out whether the event or the attack can be identified through the internet. So in the blue part, what we have is the most conventional part of incident response. So we classify the various assets based on the information sent by our red partner, resolve vulnerabilities to diminish that exposure and increase at least the difficulty of the attack, and see in which way we can limit the vulnerable data, increase barriers, and identify if something is occurring inside the organization, as well as developing a plan B in case they can actually damage the organization. Very well. We will organize all this through committees in which each one of the teams will have a weight. There's a strategic part in decision-making and reporting. That decision-making is in the hands of the top management of the company, and we have to give them all the information for taking these decisions. And they must be representatives of the three working areas, but with a greater weight of the orange part. And also we will have the operational crisis committee, and we will work with trustworthy people to define the actions at each business area, and also consider the legal implications, and finally an operational follow-up committee. This is crucial because it has to be deployed the first day, while the red and blue teams are obtaining information as stealthily as possible. So right from the start we can actually substantiate and deliver all the capabilities we're talking about. Now we get now we have the phase of deploying the capabilities. From the blue viewpoint, the first thing to do is to take stock of the environment. We have to know what we're talking about in assets, secondary companies, subsidiaries, etc. The company of this size, to do this in a morning, it's a difficult task, but you have to do it to understand how the attack would, where it would come through. So you have to identify them and see how the technical vulnerabilities are mapped. So one of the first points is to make a drawing of the operations theater. Here we have the offices distributed throughout the country, and the main cores, which are the operational services, port, airport, extraction and distribution of gas plants, some offices in other countries, and a small cloud environment. So, once we have this map, we have to understand what tools we have available to defend the environment. Firewall, safety measures, technology available, connection of systems. So the first thing is to see what this map looks like, and then what tools we have to take decisions. That is the first protection line. The second line is detection and response. We want to know in which way we can identify information about the network, what is going on, and the points at which we will collect this information. So it is important to know the detection capabilities and how to react in case we find something, isolate, have a backup center, etc. And then the recovery, we have to understand the capabilities we have to recover an environment that may be damaged and how critical this will be to the function of the entire system. We will have RTOs and RPOs for processes, and how much time I have this to respond and prepare backups as necessary. Okay, this is the core of the work. Once we have identified the business, the technological platforms, we know more or less the parameter of the company. We have to start to classify the platforms based on the mission-critical value of each. We have to ask audit reports. Later on, we will tell you the result of these audits. Network architectures, maps, communications, and then the services with third parties like B2B, B2C, with the administration, employees, etc. And we have to do this as fast as possible because we have a we're very short of time. This is the coordination scheme. We have to work as fast as possible without missing anything out and being in continuous communication. First, we had the 3 teams working in parallel. The orange coordinated with management and businesses, and made suggestions on the basis of the results. Here in red, the environment was quite complicated. The interlocutors were validated by the top management, and the rooms in which we worked, we were isolated because we were very paranoid, so we had to check for microphones, connections, if we were being followed, because we knew a lot of money was at stake. So this deployment was at a very low profile. One of the main tasks they had is the analysis of vulnerabilities, find gaps, try to break through them. We were focused on the most critical vulnerabilities and study combinations thereof. Then the strategy was handed over to the blue area with some parameters of interest for him to and his team could define what to do. But as we had to keep a low profile and avoid being detected, to remain untraceable and set up tools elsewhere and launch the processes. So once we had the vulnerability analysis, when we were able to penetrate, we could see what part of the network we ended up, and from there we could draw up a vulnerability report which basically said, this is what I found, I got as far as this is very complicated, this other part is very difficult. And then we had these three parameters: the technical complexity, the information required by an attacker to make use of this information, and the probability of being detected. Every time we got something from this guy, from the blue part, as far as possible, within the stealthy approach, we defined whether we could mitigate it within the normal pathways and patch it as a normal patch. We are accustomed to work with vulnerabilities that you do it weeks on end, but we're talking about a systematic, automatic system and very short of time. It was the only way to organize the response to the attack.
Well, for the internal side, we went to a different location where we could launch our attacks, and then if we were detected, our contact within the organization will let us know, and then we will move away from there. And then now, the task was about seeing or verifying that in case something was patched, was properly patched. Approach was bottom up. We wanted to identify all the access from IP addresses. We used to check the ranges of the public register entities as well in the world, and as well as information that we got from the company. And then we discussed that internally to see where each of those assets were allocated. So we have 14 C classes. They were linked to businesses. There were some branches that were obsolete, no longer belonging to the company. And we also found some shadow IT, that is to say platforms that were already deployed, but they were old and they were in a vulnerable server, a server that was not patched, also in difficult environments. I wouldn't like to go into detail here. And now we use the red team tools, and for that quick management between the blue and red, so we use the effect Dojo. So that helped us generate tickets so that we would keep account of all the vulnerabilities that we detected. So we realized that we were in a nightmare. So you know that there is a person inside and insider, so they are talking about maintenance of the server. Then we started to do the first scanning, the first thing, and then we started to see how difficult it was to when we analyzed the network, we found vulnerabilities, obsolete networks. So we found ourselves in a situation where we wanted to protect a large infrastructure, where there was a professional inside wanted to attack the organization and create a big impact. So when we asked for the audit reports, we went through them, and I'd like to share this with you so that all of you that are red and blue take this into account. Some machines have been Trojanized by the former company that went to that company to make an audit. So they have left software there that they use for the pivoting. So that was a big impact to us because, as I said before, we didn't know if the actual insider was using it, whether because he had access to those audit reports. Apparently, this person had technical expertise and knew how to, to do administration. He was not like a genius, but he knew what he was doing. So we wondered what we could do to secure the organization and to reduce impacts, and as well as to identify the insider. So we discussed that with Roman, but actually this is very widely used, but zero trust. So you don't want to trust anyone. When you are talking to administrators, you don't know whether the administrators are the actual insider. You know nothing about it. So the situation becomes extremely complex. We started working from the blue team, following the same structure. First of all, protection, detection and response, recovery, and then in Then we moved on to working on the central visibility of the environment, how the different segmentation tools are configured, such as firewalls, even if we couldn't change organization overnight. So we could do some small adjustments if we got information from the company about the person or the insider which was somehow trustworthy. And then because we had information about the network, that allowed us to kind of monitor it without generating lots of noise. We inserted a trunk mounting switch. We took it to one of our systems and we did monitoring from there. And actually one of the actions that were made there, we took advantage of one of the maintenance windows. So we identified a list of all the program windows for maintenance to see what are the systems that will be implemented so that we could capture the traffic to analyze it. Analyzing full traffic of the organization, it was just not possible, but at least we wanted to get some information. Another thing that we did, checking as a basis that there was an insider in, backup copies of the most critical environments were completely inaccessible. So we took some drives from the organization to secure them so that we could ensure that we could recover a critical server. And some backup copies, we also took with us some backup copies. And what we found, well, we were a bit lucky there. We, in one of the maintenance windows, we managed to gather information about the activity of the attacker. It was difficult for us to analyze it, but we could see that from domain controller we could access an external URL, and a number of binaries were being downloaded. We linked that, obviously, and right away to the activity that we have seen in the activity reports that the agency had handed up to us. Then we could see that the connections to the domain controller, we didn't know how many people were connecting to it. We could see some source machines, but we could see that malware was being downloaded. And then from domain controller, after the downloading, so we could see two completely different systems that did not fit in with the actual policy. Other than the other activities that we carried out, we decided to investigate what was happening into the system and how we could trace back this environment. So what we could see from domain controller, as I say, from domain controller, a number of tasks have been executed. One of them being adding an admin user to a group, and that was the only group that had access to some jumping machines. Then we could see that that user was used to logging to these jump machines through the IP, which was a pool of those machines. A number of tasks were made, one of them being creating a local user. Then it logged out, and then it logged in again, not through the IP of the pool, but from the machine that had been created with that user, then logged out, and then deleted the user that was created in the domain controller, and then when it logged out again. So we were a bit kind of terrified, because those jump machines gave access to all the control centers. And then Orange started to discuss or to communicate the situation to the whole business, and lots of stress was created. Well, we were certain that it was an entry channel and that the expectations that were very, very negative. So that was of high impact. All right. Now, so if they want to attack the different control centers of the businesses, we want to secure them as fast as possible. And here, blue had a significant role to play. So we decided to take a look at the ID structure, access to the various environments, and then if IT security was a bit delicate, and then in terms of OT, there will be lots of problems in terms of users, software versions. And then we were doing this very carefully, very quietly. If you go to a control center, you tell them that machines have to be updated, that they had to introduce or make changes in users. That would be a bit crazy. Yet we were able to make some adjustments to understand visibility and to kind of obtain information from the control centers. So we made a number of adjustments. We changed some of the default users. And, well, we did what the whole organization could become aware of. And then we could see the access of this insider, and then we checked whether the insider could jump to one of them. He went to the data control center. We were really anxious about that because of the potential impact that it could have. We suspected that that could happen. We monitored the attacker logging into that jump machine, and then we used one of the default user with a very simple password. So our colleagues from the previous presentation would have found that password in position number 1 or 2. So this is the one that the user used, and then he went in, and then he started to upload a number of tools, and then we could find out the software that he was running. He also Trojanized some of the servers, and here on this point, this is what Red told me. So now a very complicated situation arose in the crisis commission. You have to tell them where to press the red button. They have seen, we have located an entryway. We have alternatives for plan B in terms of isolation in case we take control, and then they debate whether we should take control now or not. And here, this point is where we explain them where we wanted to go. And now we move on to the deception environment. For us, it was very important to secure all the OT environments that could be accessed through the jump machines. However, it was impossible for us to do all this quick patching, to change everything that was vulnerable in those machines, because, to be honest, that infrastructure had not been secured for a long time, with the exception of the jump machines. And I said, well, if a detection environment will help us to detect the activity of the attacker, secure the environment, and to find out what the attacker is doing, that would be welcome. A deception environment could launch a more generic or a more targeted campaign. The generic one is about deploying elements across my whole infrastructure. If some of them is being touched, I will get an alert. Very interesting, because the machines are not connected to the production environment, but they are running parallel. If someone tries to log in or to scan them or download something from them, or we know which machine has been compromised. And then we also have targeted campaigns based on previous intelligence, where we decide to include elements simulating the real environment, and that would allow us to anticipate the activity of the attacker, find out information, finding out what are his intentions, and so that we are in full control of the situation at all times instead of the attacker. And this is the decision that we made. So when the attacker succeeded in entering the environment, he found that we have deployed a series of machines. Some of them were similar, others were not similar. We have simulated from the jump machine that the engineering station that the attacker would reach would be Windows machine, and then a number of services and other machines had also been deployed. So these are for the attacker, the this environment was very similar to his. So the attacker trojanized our system. We took a look at all the information, real-time information. We could see that on the console. That was very, very interesting because at that point we already knew what the attacker was intending to do. He had approached the gas site and then gas facility, and once we located the attacker, decision was made for us to go into operation, into contingency, to take control of all the systems and to eliminate all the entryway, or every single entryway. But that could not be made because the three groups clashed with each other, and then also, well, top management also disagreed with that. And then the top management said, well, we know who is the attacker, we know what he wants to do, we want to eradicate it. We as a blue team, we resisted, we refused that, because the takeover control is the most critical moment. So the attacker will see that we are just, we have caught them and they will try to harm the organization. If you are not well ready, they will attack you. From the viewpoint of the blue team, we were not ready. We were not ready to take in the attack because the impact would be very, very significant. But from the red team perspective, we wanted to minimize the attack. Of course, we knew that we would be having collateral damage, we would be having production issues, operational issues, but we didn't really want to risk it and not to know where the attack would be materialized, and we just didn't want to leave any entryway open so that the attack becomes successful. So no matter the discussion, control was taken. So preparing the control taken was very complex as well, based on the intelligence that we had. Preparations were made to reduce exposure as much as possible. Anything that we could manage that would not have a significant impact on the organization will be isolated or stopped. We don't know whether there are any more insiders, whether any more systems have been compromised or not. What we decided to do? To stop everything. So we looked into how we could deploy each of the environments and how to isolate each of the environments. We cannot really afford for the attacker to access one office and from there to access every single server. So we disabled all the telephony lines. So we also disabled remote accesses. Different environments were warned about a contingency test to be carried out so that the people responsible for that should be present. So a big thing happened so that everyone would be ready. And then at the same time, we really wanted to have as much real-time information as much as possible. So we just don't want to call the law enforcement agencies to come over and to take the attacker away with them. We just wanted to ensure we'll be sure of everything that was taking place, so happening simultaneously. And we also had to ensure access, just in case something went wrong, because we have already identified the attacker. We made a forensic analysis of his machine. We identify all the activity taking place in his machine. We also identify all the environments he has gained access to. We use different tools to analyze his system, all the systems he has accessed. So we check whether there was anything strange or not. And well, that was the end of my task. Okay. Oh no, now you have to
Bueno, aquí lo que pasa es que me llevan presionando unos cuantos días porque quieren
to
que
keep
hagamos
what
una
you
fusión
said.
rollo bola de dragón, ¿sabes?
Well,
Venga, con
actually,
vídeo y
they've
todo.
been putting pressure on me for the last few days. Well, now the red team doesn't have so much work, but then now it has to help out the blue team. Okay, let us go for it.
¡Fusión!
Merger.
Bueno, vamos a ver.
Ha tenido huevos, ¿eh? Decía que no lo sabía, sí, ahí está. Venga, ponte azul. Ya tenemos dos
All right,
azules.
so now you are blue.
Vamos allá, bueno, ya queda muy poquito tiempo, pero vamos a la
Me van a
parte...
hacer memes de
You're nearly finishing now.
Yo el primero. Restauremos entorno.
Okay, we will restore the environment now.
Durante el momento de toma de control en el que sale
So
la
when we took the
y se
control,
intenta garantizar la continuidad de los servicios,
when we ensure continuity of the business, we stopped the environment. So the domain controller
inicialmente era una barbaridad
did not have an internet connection
no tenía capacidad de darle
because we could see that
el empezar a con todo el resto de
here,
elementos que
together with the rest of the elements that we have cut off, or the elements that we had isolated,
poco a poco al día a día.
little by little we have to go back to business as usual. But going back to business as usual from this starting point was about taking all the steps one by one, ensuring that the attacker was not back in the organization. So little by little, as I say, we were recovering the lines of communication, the isolation
Usuarios conectarse desde otros sitios e ir trabajando.
that the users were into. So when we were starting the servers, our red team was making a number of tests. We were checking whether we could make improvements in the configurations. And because we had a map of all the services, we were controlling the perimeter continuously. If there were any changes in the services, then an alert was triggered. So we did that for the external perimeter, where we have all the IP addresses as well as the critical platforms. So we set up some access rules, and from there we were monitoring 5 platforms specifically. Obviously, the crisis did not end here. Lots of work was yet to be done. First of all, ever since then, the company is highly aware of cybersecurity. The organization is now aware that the company, if highly exposed, business can be actually compromised and there may be significant financial losses. So a number of lessons have been learned. So the first one, that red line on top, the red line of an organization is different in the day-to-day life and in a crisis scenario. So that red line could be of legal nature or of any other nature. So here I just didn't want to add any explanation or to... That depends very much on the DNA of the company, of decision makers, how much they want to risk or not, because they may have a different risk appetite. Other than that, many conclusions can be drawn. For instance, capability to respond to a high-impact incident, not only security capabilities, orchestrating the whole incident in a manner that you can launch specific actions to face up to the risks that have a direct impact on the organization. Here we're talking about the red and blue capabilities, capabilities that are to be targeted so that at the end of the day everything is aimed at the survival of the company. At that time, when they're in that crisis situations, they don't care whether the accounting system is down or anything that you would do. They just want you to put an end to the crisis and how you can help companies survive. So when you ask them about this and that, they go and say, well, you have to do that in an hour. But then later on, when they are in a crisis situation and they say, well, 4 days is enough. Okay, no problem. We give you all that time. Criticality of the environments and the time periods change significantly, and the below the line, we did not the crisis as well as the crisis that we can see in the teams, the stressful moments where you may be spied, or the consequences of what you do may also risk the life of people. So that's a high stressful situation. Well, this is all from us. Now it is time for questions. Congratulations. Impressive. Julio? Hello, very interesting. However, I feel that this is not cheap at all, isn't it? Could you give us an estimation? How much was that for Gacetia in terms of time, team, etc.? Financial impact of responding with a highly qualified team is very, very low, considering the consequences. So Gacetia has a turnover of 17 million. If we have a highly critical environment versus a less critical environment, so we are talking about different sizing. So all these may start at the time of the crisis, processes, recovery, and when that happens, we deploy full capabilities. And as I say, the cost of it depends on the capabilities that we deploy. No, well, with this I mean, so that if we when we think about having a response capacity in place, we have to give allocate figures to that, or a cost to it. Well, you should finish off your presentation for so potential losses. So 1 year out of service because 8 pipes have been destroyed. So it will be very interesting for you to mention that at the end of your presentation, which are the potential losses if you don't apply this. Any other questions? In the meantime, I have a question. What was the most complex, the most difficult part of this process? So what the red team do and then the merger with the blue team? What was the most difficult? The day-to-day or the orange team fighting and battling with the top management and officers? This is a very, very difficult question. Well, we all sweat a lot, we all worked really hard. Well, we were never asked that question, but I think the most difficult part is the blue part. The moment you have to secure something which is unsecure, that's the most difficult bit. So that's where the highest accountability lies. Yes, it's desperating. So when you say, I have it, it will be materialized, it will happen. For sure, whether you do it or not, it may have a significant impact, but the most difficult part is explaining the damage that you are assuming to reduce potential damage. Sitting down with people and saying, look, if I stop this, I will stop all the communication between the gas pipe and the headquarters. All the breakdowns that you will have, you will not be able to fix them. However, you will have to pay this compensation. And then you will say, yes, this will be a stop for a couple of days, and you will lose this amount of money. So that debate, that discussion is very, very difficult. That's the most difficult part. Well, this could help you develop a business case to be taught at business schools. Very, very interesting. We have a last question. First of all, congratulations for your presentation. It's been very interesting. From phase 0 to phase 5, how long did it take? Well, in case of Gazetia, that took a few days, say 2 weeks, not months. So from the message, we knew that, well, we were taking advantage of maintenance windows. This company used to have maintenance every 2 weeks. So 2 days later, we had information about what was happening. Then it took a bit longer to access the controller environment. So that was what took longer. That was over a week, up until phase 4, until recovery phase, up until the takeover of control. That was a week. Okay, last question now. So congratulations.
I have a technical question. At the point in which you start working against the attacker from the jump machine, you simulate what he had before. How do you get this process to avoid having an impact on the system, changing IPs, or well, the machine with the local user created had the routing that we had cloned, so we had to separate it. We made a channel, and we were fortunate. If we wouldn't have seen that user created in that machine, and he connected to pool, and to be discreet, he connected the user only in one. So it took it out from the pool, and we substituted it in the honeypot environment. Once he was connected there, the visibility of the machine was virtual, so we could manage it transparently without damaging the environment, because we were thinking the same as you. We had the attacker inside, we couldn't do changes in the infrastructure without raising the alarm. And we had modified the environment, but no, only the machine. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Congratulations.